industrial work. At the end of this session, you will be able to describe the work ideology, explain about work values, explain about the work attitudes, describe the factors which affect the motivation at the workplace, explain about work satisfaction. Industrial sociology aims at discovering the new means by which people working in different industry learn the new symbolism, define the life positions and how to define the consequences of the views which people hold on to while working in any industry. This article deals with the details of all the experience involvements with the people in any industry. With several concepts, this is taken up broadly in this article. The major and primary task is to define them and see how closely they are related to each other. Apart from this, the various others terms which are used to define the same thing and concepts have been dealt more closely. The major concepts and categorization that is dealt with this include the evaluation of work in an industry or as a social activity and various terms associated with relating to the subjective experience of certain work roles. The former concept revolves around with two major terms, value and ideology. All the members in the society hold the working ideology. Apart from this, an allied group forms certain lower order concepts like attitudes, beliefs, values and opinions. All these are applicable to all the rules and concepts that are used to maintain the challenges to maintain the social order and serve to dispel and alleviate the fear. At the same time, it aims to create certain hopes among all the people. The same ideology is also attributed by any other terms like ethos and image of the society. Work values are a broader concept by which a group of society pronounces the features of work to be serious or good. The difference between these two concepts should be understood in details. The subjective understanding of the world roles includes a more or less general views associated with motivation, satisfaction and attitude. A close relationship is shared between the values and attitude, which describes an approach with which a person works because of rejection and acceptance of certain values of his group or society. Motivation is the primary factor that draws and pulls people to work towards a special goal with the work. This is applicable to a job or a narrow range of jobs. While satisfaction is totally job-centric term, it clearly demarcates what the worker expects and what he gets in reality. It also refers to what one undergoes and suffers in a work-related environment. The work ideology. According to Bell, the end of the war has been an end to the ideology, radicalism and a turning point towards the status and culture rather than politics. Ideology is not free from any confusion and ambiguity, represents a long-term and coherent system of belief which guides all the consideration and short-term actions. If we have reached a point of consensus about the goals pertaining to society, or we have lost any more interest in them, we can conclude that the ideology has ended. However, different sociologists has a different perception about this topic. Fox, a grand sociologist, has a different view altogether about ideology. According to him, ideology is a means to achieve the target by struggling hard for the power. As it gives a new shape and direction to thought, way of thinking, feeling and action, we find many competing ideologies which rule this world. However, we will be discussing in details about one of it. It is seen that labor and management have developed a different and complementary ideologies associated with work. Bendix mentions that the managerial ideologies justify the power of management that is related to values of culture. These ideologies are the characteristics of the business community and virtually have affected the complete American society. Management apologists think to proliferate and promulgate an ideology that will explain the management behavior, develops loyalty and commitment, justifies the rules on the higher as well as lower participants. According to Fox, this ideology comprises of an assortment of beliefs to fit the varying exigencies which may not be compatible with each other. So what becomes as inducement and encourage for the managers becomes bribes when they are given to the wage workers. Managerial ideology in general emphasizes on the unitary concept of the organization. The managers comforts and guarantees a basic peace and harmony in the organization by a single method. However, it is seen that this is countered by some malevolent or minority. It is used as a means to convince the employees and the public in general about the harmony and is utilized as an instrument in the hunt for legitimating of the higher authorities. Trade unions and other associations have their own ideologies which are entirely different from those of the management. At some end, managers and professionals have an ideology that cannot be clearly distinguished from that of the management. Their ideologies stress upon the desirability and validity of collaboration. At the other end, unions follow confrontational policies that are based on an ideology of antagonism and objection to the management, pleading to the cohesion of all workers, resulting in close brotherhoods. However, there are cases where there is an existence of a group in the unions which strictly follow the existing basic way to control the system. Ideologies are prevalent at a level of large collectivities or complete society or may be a part of workers in an organization. The work values. There are a lot of research on the moral values. A lot of them are associated with the ways they are used while choosing an occupation or training. Rosenberg and his associates in the year 1957 have made earliest comprehensive and enlightening studies on this topic. According to survey by them on the American students' aspirations, expectations and preferences, they concluded that students fall into three categories. One group which expects the reward of the work, other who ask if the work will involve challenges or not, lastly who ask if they will enjoy working with other people or not. Students who plan to enter the different job show different values in varying amounts. Those who plan to enter into social work, social science, medicine and personal work showed values associated with people oriented. The relationship between the nature of works and social values advocate that what students expect from his work channels and delimits the array of occupations which might be interesting for him. Many people have worked on these topics and closely examined and scrutinized the relationship between the prospective careers and values, which includes development of identification with an occupation. Lyman compared the two broad categories of workers, the blue collar and white collar worker, which constitutes the occupational world. In her search, she tried to find out the various values associated with these two groups of workers and finally concluded that the latter believed on the nature of work and freedom, while the former emphasized on the easy nature of work, cleanliness, condition of work and economic rewards. This difference were not a result of job satisfaction but were a constant pattern for several reasons of disliking and liking a job. While drawing conclusion, she faced difficulty as she mentioned that the results might be open to other elucidations that difference in what is accepted. Box in 1963 studied the various value orientation of different set of employees roughly doing the same task. Laboratory workers were divided into technicians and professionals according to the educational prestige. The work is highly much material for the professionals, while the technicians were more concerned about security of job and pay. The difference in the values was because the professionals wanted to get involved in all phases of life fully and were frequently rewarded all the time. Work attitudes. The general line of attack or approach that people take to their work comprises their work attitudes. Contextually speaking, the term orientation means much the same as an attitude or a readiness to respond and react to the myriad aspects of work in terms of the values and morals held. Several studies of the attitudes of people in different work situations and occupations have been conducted, the findings of which can be grouped according to a few significant variables. Although social interaction and work situation variables are significant factors, the manual and non-manual categories, skill level and age groups are also obvious examples. 4 groups of occupations may be selected for analysis to briefly illustrate some of the consequences of these variables for work attitudes. These 4 groups, which together account for a large proportion of the labor force, are professionals, clerks, skilled craftsmen and semi-skilled factory workers. Kaplow in 1964 records a number of traits of professional work that together produce lots of typical work attitude. They are the difference and distinction drawn between co-professionals and laymen, the concentration of interest that marks the professional career, the long training period, and casual association outside of the working hours. More often than not, the professional attitude to work contrasted and compared with the bureaucratic attitude. The former is characteristics of the cosmopolitan who tends to have a rather low loyalty to his employing organization, a high commitment and dedication to his role, skills and outgroup reference, while the bureaucrat typically shows high loyalty to his employing organization, low commitment and dedication to role skills and in-group reference. Another group of occupations is that of the clerk. Their work attitudes reflect their wide-ranging work situations and diverse social class affiliations. As Lockwood has shown, the older and more paternalistic work relations and environment of the clerk have precluded any sense of identification with other types of workers. This has led to characteristic and idiosyncratic aspirations to advancement much similar to those of professionals. With the enlargement and diversification of office units and the standardization of work relationships and methodologies, group feeling, collective action and a trade union attitude to earnings and working conditions have developed among clerks much like those of the factory. The printer may be taken as an example of the skilled craft occupations. Studies both in Britain and America have described the nature of the occupational community in which printers tend to live. Lipset and his colleagues in 1956 show that inherent concern in the craft tends to encourage a high degree of participation in the work organization and particularly in union activities. The members of occupational communities see themselves in terms of their occupational role, and their reference group is composed of other members of the occupational community. Salomon in 1971 has suggested the involvement of these very attitudes in the marginal status, work tasks, and the inclusiveness of the organization or work situation. Semi-skilled factory workers are the fourth group whose attitudes we may consider for analysis. Car assembly workers have been the subject of a lot of interesting studies in America. As discussed inquiry in Britain by Goldthorpe and his colleagues in 1968 largely endorses the American findings that the car worker is characteristically alienated and estranged from his work, attached to his job only as a means of earning relatively high wages, and is in some senses a prototype of the new working class. Nevertheless, they go on to develop a conjectural description of the orientation to work of these employees. They criticize both the human relations school and the technological implications methodology, the former for assuming and proposing that men seek from their work approval, recognition, and so on besides money, and the latter for claiming that more conflict is generated by assembly line technologies than other technologies. In its place, they point to the importance of the wants and expectations that men bring to their work. They also suggest that this previous orientation shapes the attitudinal and behavioral patterns of their working lives as a whole. In the cases that they studied, the orientation to work was contributory, and hence they argued the non-existence of such features of employment as solitary work groups or employee-centered supervision was unlikely to produce any noticeable degree of frustration or discontent. Goldthorpe and his colleagues keep a sociological view of orientation to work, that is, they see it as socially produced and sustained, but there is also a psychological view which asserts that the individual's professional interests are well determined before job experience, and that people of certain personality, perceptual habits, and value types characteristically seek out occupations that allow the free play of these behaviors. It is also said that Cohn and Schuler drew conclusions from their survey that is closer to Daniel's criticism of orientation. They argue that professional experiences permeate the person's views of the world and the self, besides pervading their views of work and their role in the work. They differentiate between conditions of work that enable intrinsic interest in the job and those that limit men's views of the job chiefly to the extrinsic benefits it provides. Without underestimating the role of psychological differences or of social factors in prior orientations to work, we may cite one further piece of evidence in support of the autonomous effect of work situation variables on attitudes. Lieberman noted the effect of role changes on attitudes. Management is favored by workers who became supervisors through if demoted they reverted to worker attitudes, while the union was favored by those workers who were made shop stewards. The motivation to work. The next section on work satisfaction and this section are related closely. In that section we define something known as potential satisfies, a term given to factors that motivate an individual to work. Industrial psychologists have carried out lots of research focusing on incentives, motives and management. Managers all around the world have been searching for a way to liberate their motivation genie. This was said by Finn. Increased human productivity at work would give enormous payoffs, but the genie still seems to be locked in the magic, judging by the practices being followed in the industries. McGregor and Herzberg are two psychologists famous for their work in this field. Rush in 1969 studied some managers trying to figure out their behavioral science when he realized that theories put forward by McGregor and Herzberg were true. McGregor put forward his theories of X and Y. These theories are in actually fundamental beliefs that relate to the character of man that persuade managers to take on strategy X or Y. Strategy X being the conventional strategy of putting the workers in control by carrot and stick method, and strategy Y being self-direction. His man thesis shows that workers need a sense of fulfillment after they work. If they do not find this fulfillment, then they will feel depressed, the result of which would be a workforce with a negative attitude towards the management's goals. Corman pointed out that this theory does not have any strong foundations, as when tested for performance in industries it failed. Herzberg's theory and McGregor's theory have a lot in common. They find themselves being based on the idea of self-actualization and needs. Herzberg postulated in his two-factor theory that satisfaction and disappointment are not the opposite extremes of this field. Corman believes that satisfaction, sense of achievement and respect gives way to motivation. Disappointment is usually due to hygiene, corporation policy and administration. The theory of X and Y has been critically assessed by Stephenson and Wall in 1970. The two-factor theory is by and large a function of the want for social support according to their research. They defend the policy of work enrichment through promoting satisfaction and dispelling disappointment. Work satisfaction. According to several researchers on the topic job and work satisfaction, it is not possible to put down all the points here. It has vast and huge. Here we present the conclusion drawn by the Parker and Davis after a survey in the year 1964 and 1971 respectively. There are several ways to collect data on the satisfaction. The most common way is to inquire whether a person finds his job satisfying or not. Sometimes there may be questions like in what way. This question is asked openly, or a list of factors is represented to rank in order where does it stand. Another method is to question what makes a job bad or good. A more primitive and complicated way is to speculate the needs in connection to work and further ask about the extent to which these were actually contented. A lot of studies have been made to associate with many occupations. Among all of them, office and factory work are predominate. It is reported that there are intrinsic contents among the skilled factory workers and craftsmen. This comes usually when the job involves completion of the whole project. But the assembly line workers hold more importance to be able to control to the vast extent the methods and pace of the work they do. Multiplicity of maneuver is the foundation of satisfaction for both the factory and office workers. and among the latter, the sociability of the working group is often mentioned by the females. While drawing a comparison among the number of workers in different occupations, there seems to be different scales of non-manual and manual jobs, which gave much more satisfaction than higher levels of skilled works. According to reports, it is seen that professional workers are more contented, while the semi-skilled and unskilled manual workers are least satisfied. Social interaction is an influential factor that affects the satisfaction. Independence in a work situation, freedom to make the own decisions and take is a positive factor that affects job satisfaction. If three persons are engaged in the same work with someone doing better, worse, the first thing which will be seen is the job enjoyment. Lenient supervision and leadership, being consulted beforehand about the changes in the work process or supervision and leadership, and being consulted in advance about changes in the work process contribute to the job satisfaction. With general jobs, people are more satisfied than others. Personal attributes affect the job satisfaction in a great way. It is seen that women are more satisfied with their work compared to men, even though the job involves lower authority position, income and status. Satisfaction heightens with age, and although there is an inclination for young to find the inherent aspects of the work and old to find it in the technical and social environment. Higher class and states are associated with satisfaction, but among those doing the same job, better education is linked to lower satisfaction. Insecurity in a job is supplemented by good objective conditions that adversely affect satisfaction. It is highly ambiguous to relate satisfaction to productivity. Some studies have found negative linkage while others suggest a positive association. Some studies also show no relationship. Giving conclusions to this diverse topic of work, one needs to be practical and also take others' criticisms into account. The statistics of general satisfaction with one's work tells us little. This is due to the fact that we cannot figure out what these questions mean to people who respond to them. Very limited range is given to the questions, making the chances of expressing satisfaction slim without searching for potential alternatives. People think in different ways about their satisfaction when conscious and unconscious states of mind. The affinity to suppress dissatisfaction is steadily supported by prevalent feeling that being satisfied is accepting defeat.